ESPN NFL draft analyst Field Yates joining us right now on the Emerald Queen Casino Sportsbook Hotline. Field, I cannot wait to dive into this class. Obviously, some names that we're eyeing for Seattle, but I'm going to start with the quarterbacks. I don't know if Seattle's in the market for one in the first round, but I find it to be a fascinating draft. Who's coming in at QB3 for you?
Yeah, it's a good question, one that I think will evolve over the next couple of months. That being said, as we stand here in early February, I think Jackson Dart's got a decent grip on quarterback 3 for this reason, is that, the draft is never about what consensus teams reach, because if one team prefers a player like Jalen Milroe to Jackson Dart, that one team might be the team that takes the third quarterback in the draft, and all of a sudden those who feel as though Jackson Dart is QB3 are rendered incorrect. That being said, both in terms of the body of work that we saw during his time at Ole Miss and then also last week at the Senior Bowl, and also kind of gauging the temperature of a lot of people around the NFL, it does feel as though Jackson Dart has probably put together the most powerful case as of right now for quarterback 3, the most complete case as of right now. And Jackson's an interesting guy. He's got a lot of experience. He broke Eli Manning's school passing record at Ole Miss after beginning his career at USC. He's a solid athlete. He can do a little bit of damage with his legs as well. It's an interesting offense to project at the NFL level because he never played from under center. He threw 2 passing attempts from under center last season, did Jackson Dart. And, you're playing in an offense where a lot of the reads were made for you, which is not nearly as frequently the case at the NFL level. So Jackson's got some real solid tape, but still a projection. And this quarterback class is definitely not the same as what we saw last year when we had 6 guys go in the first 12 picks.
Hey, Phil, well, we like to do this. We like to find a comp, and I've been interested in Jackson, got to cover some of his games. Who would you compare him to? If there was a guy that gives you Jackson Dart vibes in NFL, who is it?
Oh, man. Something, I'm like the anti-comps guy myself, so I don't have a good answer for that right now on Jackson. I'd say athletically, he's solid. Like a comp that I've seen that I think checks out in terms of his ability to impact the game with his legs is Trevor Lawrence, and not the profile nearly that Trevor had coming out Clemson when he was clear-cut number 1 pick in that 2021 NFL draft. But Trevor, a guy who can impact the game with his legs, like Jackson. You're going to count on him more doing his damage, as a pocket passer at the NFL level. Jackson has a solid, a lot of what he brings to the table is solid. But when you stack all those traits together, solid in this class might be good enough to go in the first round. Jackson, very accurate passer, throws, with a clean delivery. Mechanics are fundamentally sound here, has great energy and leadership. That was something that the Senior Bowl staff really told me stood out last week when he was down there in Mobile. And again, people that have studied this class since its inception maybe felt differently about how things would end up for quarterback 3 going into the season. But as we reach, the final week of the NFL season and then the combine just a few weeks away, I think there is a feeling like Jackson's got some first-round momentum.
Yeah, I feel like we're going to see more quarterbacks have the number of starts that Jackson has. He's got 45 in college because of NIL, right? They're enticed to stay a bit longer. Is that something that you hear scouts talk about? How important is that moving forward, the starts that a young man has at that level?
Yeah, well, just last year we saw 2 quarterbacks have a ton of success right away, and there's certainly a lot of reason for optimism with guys like Caleb Williams and Drake May and Michael Penix Jr. and eventually J.J. McCarthy. But Bo Nix and Jaden Daniels didn't necessarily have a ton in common other than the fact that they both played 5 full seasons of college football. I don't think that's the only reason why those guys had success, not even close. That being said, teams that are saying to themselves, if you've got 50-plus starts of tape to work off of, at least it makes you feel good that your evaluation has got a chance to prove accurate at the NFL level. Jackson with 45, that's plenty in my book. This is not like some of the greener quarterbacks that we have seen come out. J.J. McCarthy, basically a 2-year starter. Drake May, a 2-year starter, obviously going back to 2018. Mitchell Trubisky, that was a huge question mark for a guy who had under 15 college starts and was eventually taken number 2 overall. So we definitely have seen experience translate to the NFL. And I think that Jackson having, tape at 2 separate schools and, certainly a lot of success at Ole Miss is going to be a factor that people around the NFL find to be, makes the projection a bit more solid going into his rookie season, regardless of where he ends up.
Hey, Field, the Seahawks could find themselves in an interesting position in the kind of middle late of the first round, which is that their stated philosophical goal with the draft, not unique to them, is, hey, we want the best available player. But their greatest need by far is the interior offensive line. I don't know that at 18, the best player on the board is going to be an interior lineman, but that's also their greatest need. What do you think they should do if they find themselves in that situation?
Yeah, it's a good point because, it's not a guarantee that it lines up there. And, there are a few offensive linemen that I think have interior line capabilities that could be there at number 18. Tyler Booker from Alabama is a player who you're going to hear a lot about over the next few months. Guy who started a ton of games, actually played 68 snaps this past year at left tackle as well. But he is a guard through and through. He's 325 pounds on the roster. He might be closer to 335 or so by the time we get to the actual combine where you get those real verified measurements. He's huge. He's powerful. He's a really good player. Armand Membu, who is a 20-year-old from Missouri who played 3 seasons with the Tigers there, was an early entrant, had a great last season. He was a right tackle from Missouri, but some are wondering whether he might be better suited as a guard because he had about 6'3" and a quarter. That being said, he had these long arms at the Senior Bowl that suggest he might stay at tackle. My feeling with the Seahawks is that I certainly would feel very strongly about getting an offensive lineman at number 18 if the board aligns, but I'm also open to being a bit more dynamic with my line combinations going forward in the sense that not that they haven't been open to mixing and matching things as needed because they certainly had to this past year with all the injuries. But, if I'm sitting there in the Seattle draft room, you feel really good about, you feel good about left tackle, right? Charles Cross is your guy. He's going to be there. Everything else with Abe Lucas's health and inconsistency in terms of being available, that's a position that I think you feel good about when he's healthy. But, over the past 2 years has played, I think it's 17 games or 13 games over the past 2 seasons. So you have to be open to if there's a great tackle available there that you think could become a 6 or 7 solid starter, whether it's exploring Abe Lucas at guard, or whether it's moving somebody to guard that you draft as a tackle. I think you just have to be open-minded to getting your best 5 on the field because, as we saw last year, that offensive line can lead to all kinds of unbuttoning of the offense.
I love keeping track of what's going on. Why it starts with the Hula Bowl, then the Shrine, and you go to the Senior Bowl. And I like the stories of a guy who shows up that nobody really knew. And then by the time he leaves, he's the talk of the practice, the talk of the game. Is there a guy that did that for you this year?
Yeah, I think that maybe the name that comes to mind that fits that category most closely is Gray Zabel from North Dakota State, who, is definitely on the draft radar for those of us that are covering it year-round. He's a guy that we've known a lot about. But, North Dakota State just doesn't get the same level of coverage despite their incredible success at the FCS level. They're like the Chiefs of the FCS. They just win every year. That being said, a guy who came to Mobile and had some questions he had to answer still. Not that they don't play the best of the FCS at North Dakota State, but the truth is that, he's a player that isn't going to go up against NFL defensive tackles and defensive ends every single week. Thinking all the way back to the beginning of this season, Colorado obviously was a very well-covered team. Good reason. They played North Dakota State in their first game of the year, and I had scouts telling me, hey, I know you guys are talking about Shador, and Travis Hunter, but and you should. Those guys are going to end up being high draft picks, but there's some players here at North Dakota State that have drawn our attention as well, none more prominently than Gray Zabel, who was a college left tackle during his final season, moved to guard and center during the week at the Senior Bowl. Doesn't have super long arms, not a huge guy, 305 pounds, but one-on-one drills at the Senior Bowl are amongst the highlights of the week, and I don't know if anybody had a better week start to finish than Gray Zabel in terms of his one-on-ones.